Listen, Meg, thank you for joining us. All right, give me your thoughts on this CDC study, this report that's coming out.
Well, the CDC numbers are alarming, right? And as a parent of a public school student, all of our kids graduated from public schools. I'm familiar with this survey instrument. In our county, it's given almost every year. I know that the CDC data is collected biannually, but many counties collect this data every year. And so the kinds of questions that are asked can seem, from a parent's eye, a little bit leading. And the other factor that I think we're not discussing enough, sadly, is the just absolute epidemic of pornography that confronts children in our society. And the fact that a lot of these identities are a reaction to children being exposed to pornography at younger and younger ages. Because when you ask children about their sexual identities in this way, many of them are making claims about who they are, and attaching, a sexuality to that when they've never even shared a first kiss or had any sort of meaningfully, emotionally intimate relationship with another person. And so in that regard, I think that these statistics can be very much overblown. And yet we do need to be concerned that children are willing to identify themselves in these ways and wonder why exactly is that?
Yeah, I mean, it's extremely concerning, but I mean, there's no question what you just said. We are over sexualizing this generation, beginning with young children. I mean, yeah, and then we have, I guess, one question, just kind of a yes or no kind of thing. Should the CDC even be studying this at all? Is this the role of the CDC? I mean, aren't they supposed to be just studying like contagious diseases and that type of thing? Why is the CDC even doing this at all? Do you have any idea?
Well, the justification is that you have children who are presenting themselves in a pediatric care setting, maybe with a sexually transmitted disease, right? That's the justification for studying these kinds of behaviors, and asking these questions. But the real problematic part of it is what you alluded to earlier, which is the politicization of this. Of course, we don't want children to engage in sexual activity too early and to have a sexually transmitted disease, obviously, right? But the idea that you're going to justify huge governmental expenditures, and I wish that Irene had been able to speak to this, because when she had studied a major sex ed curriculum in the United States that claimed to reduce unwanted pregnancy, unintended pregnancy, and sexually transmitted diseases, it failed on all those measures in the areas where it was studied. The reported incidence increased with the use of the sex ed program. And so, that is the kind of thing where government just misses the mark. And we all, as parents and concerned citizens about where this country is going, we need to pray for our children and our grandchildren, and we need to have meaningful relationships with them. Parents and grandparents need to talk to their grandchildren and children, try to understand them, share your life with them. Try to be interested in the things that they're interested in, and just let them experience authentic relationships in their own homes and communities, so that these inauthentic relationships that are presented online aren't nearly as attractive.
I think that is really, really good advice, and I want to go into that a little bit further, because when you look at the comparative, I mean, these kids are in school a whole lot more than they are around the dinner table with their families. And these days, we know so many families don't really any longer have that special dinner time as a family. And yet at the school, there is this constant barrage of these kids being indoctrinated. They've got the social pressure. They're being confused with all the sex education type stuff that's coming down. You got all this bombardment on television, on radio. You're just say you're a grandparent, a parent for the very first time, and that you're dealing with this stuff. What advice do you have for parents and grandparents, perhaps confronting this for the very first time?
Well, our children are not growing up in the world that we grew up in, and they have access to technologies that provide them with images that we would never even have imagined would be seen. And they are seeing these things at very, very young ages, at formative ages. And we need to be honest with ourselves about that. As much as we try to protect our children from those images, there is a billion-dollar pornography industry that is coming after our children with their messaging. And so we need to be really, explaining to our own children the beauty and the wonder of God's plan for human sexuality. And we need to be sure that we're modeling happy married life in our own homes for our children. And in the cases where children are not growing up in this environment, we need to be honest about the crisis in the family that exists in many communities and in our own homes. And we need to engage those people positively with the love of Christ and our own witness of our own happy lives in response.
Absolutely. Meg Kilgannon, thank you so much for joining us this evening on Washington on Watch. Always great to see you and always great to talk with you.
Thank you, Jody.